Have you ever dreamed about having hundreds of thousands of classic retro games at your disposal, but you're not really into emulation and you wouldn't even know where to start? What if I told you there was a one-and-done device you could buy that would emulate not only the classic games from your childhood, but even some of the more complicated and hard to emulate systems of the late 90s? Hello, retro gaming and home arcade enthusiasts. It's me, Michael B. Thank you so very much for watching. And on today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Kinhank Supercube X3. So that's right, guys. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Kinhank Supercube X3. This little emulation device boasts more than 100,000 classic retro games. I want to say a huge thank you to Kinhank for sending me out the Supercube X3 for the purpose of this review. Anyways, guys, before we get into that, I want to say thank you so much for checking out the video. Guys, I always appreciate the support. If this is your first time to the channel, you like what you see, go ahead, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, all that YouTube stuff. So guys, here we have the Super Console Cube X3, the upgrade from the original Super Console X. Alright, let's take a look at what we have here in the box. So we pull everything out. There's a big white box on top. Underneath you'll find some instruction manuals and an SD card for some reason, which I'm not entirely sure. Then we get the exact same two controllers that came with the Super Console X. These are merely PlayStation DualShock-like controllers. They're a little light, but they feel okay. So again, we have some instruction manuals. We have instructions on the controllers. We also have instructions for setting up our Super Console Cube X3 as well. It'll go through all the setup and everything like that. I mean, who really looks at the instructions, right? Let's take a look at what we got in the box here. So we open up the box, and the first thing we're going to pull out is the Super Console X Cube X3. This thing looks an awful lot like a Nintendo Entertainment System, that's for sure. It's funny because the Super Console X looks so much like a Super Famicom. I guess that was the motif they were going with. And also inside we have an HDMI cable. There's the power cord in that box there, and we have a remote for some reason. So there's the power cord. So guys, let's take a look at the controller here, and like I mentioned, this is formed after the DualShock 2 controller. The buttons, sticks, D-pad, everything feels relatively nice. This should do the job. If you open up the back, this is going to take two AAA batteries, and it actually has a 2.4 gigahertz connector that plugs in. Anyways, guys, so we check out gameplay with the controller, and let me tell you, anything you're going to play on this, as long as you don't care about exact precision, you're going to get a pretty good experience with this controller. Now, me personally, I expect a certain level of gameplay, so what I did here was I did my Mega Man 2 test, and I saw, boom, that I could not pass the lasers on Flashman's stage. Luckily, you can use other controllers with your Super Console Cube X3. I personally like the 8BitDo gamepads. They plug in, they work perfectly. So running the exact same latency test with the new controller, and as you can see, I had no problem getting through Flashman's lasers on Mega Man 2, which means, yes, this actually emulates pretty well and controls well. With that out of the way, let's talk about what's included of the 100,000 games, and we've got some new consoles here. Pretty much everything you can think of, including some higher-powered consoles. First off, I wanted to test some of the more difficult to emulate NES games to see how this would run, and just like with the Super Console X, Batman Return of the Joker on the NES runs perfectly, so no problem there. And I also checked out Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. As most people know, if you do emulation with the NES Classic, this is another game that does not emulate well. Then I just kind of played around and played some of my favorite retro games to see how they all worked, and they all work great. Anytime I get a chance to play Turtles in Time, I'm a happy guy. Last time, I did notice that there were some issues with the Super Console X running the Dreamcast. Most games worked okay, but I can say performance worked a lot better on the Super Console Cube X3. Specifically, I wanted to take another look at Soul Calibur, because as you remember, there were several graphical issues running Soul Calibur on the Super Console X. Happy to report there aren't such issues here. Another console that did have some issues running on the Super Console X, it worked but not flawlessly, was the Nintendo 64. GoldenEye is one of the harder games to actually get working on emulation for the 64 for some reason, so I booted this up and this played spectacularly. Performance was definitely much better on the Super Console Cube X3. I noticed a much smoother gameplay experience. I will say, however, the experience wasn't flawless. As you can take a look at the screen here, and I don't know what's going on, but there's still some graphical issues that you can see. I tried out some other games to see how they would run as well. Hydro Thunder was an absolute blast to play on this little home console. There was definitely a wider variety of N64 games to choose from and enjoy, and it's Hydro Thunder. I mean, it's awesome, man. I also got to check out Castlevania 64, the illegitimate stepchild of the Castlevania series. I remember getting this game at launch and being so disappointed by what it was compared to what I thought Castlevania would be in 3D. It's wild looking back at it now, and you know, it runs pretty well on the Super Console Cube X3. So then moving on to PlayStation, and PlayStation runs fantastically on the Super Console Cube X3. Everything about the gameplay is really, really good. Graphics run smoothly, no slowdown, very happy with it, but there is one slight issue. That's right. There's no sound for some reason. I mean, there's BFX sounds, but there is no actual music being played. I checked out a couple other games, like I wanted to go back and test Mortal Kombat 4 again, and the exact same thing. You can hear gameplay sounds, but no music. Get over here! Again, to test that this wasn't an anomaly, I went and played a couple other PlayStation games. Again, the games run fantastically. Here's Ridge Racer. I'm having a lot of fun playing it. But again, no BGM, no actual music. I guess this is just a glitch with the Super Console Cube X3. I went into settings. I'm sure there's some way to get the music to play, but I mean, I want this to be a plug-and-play experience, and for some reason, there's just no music, and it's a shame because the PlayStation music is so good. Anyways, I wanted to then move on and test some of the higher-end games. So this actually has PlayStation Portable games, and I was so excited to play MotorStorm, except there's an opening video, and for some reason it runs at 4 frames per second, and I just could not get it to work.
2 hours later.
Luckily, I didn't give up with the PSP, and I went back and I checked out Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, and this actually ran pretty smooth. It ran at about 30 frames per second, but the gameplay was fun. Definitely still can play PlayStation Portable games. Another system I was really surprised to see here was the Nintendo DS. I had to check it out, so I turned on Order of Ecclesia, and I gotta say, the game actually ran really well, albeit with very small screens. Another thing I was really excited to check out was some Sega arcade hardware from the late 90s. I checked out Zombie's Revenge on the Sega Naomi. This game's an absolute treat. We're in the middle of Halloween Havoc right now, and by the middle I haven't even started yet, but I'll definitely be doing a gameplay through Zombie's Revenge at some point this month. Then I checked out Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and after there was some slight disappointment with how this ran on the Arcade 1-Up hardware, I am surprised at just how well this runs on the Super Console Cube X3. I mean, it's pretty much flawless. A console I haven't spent time with in a very long time now is the Panasonic 3DO. Excited to see it here. So, of course, I had to play 2 of the best games, one of which is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which may be the best home port of Super Street Fighter 2. And I also got to check out Road Rash, which is just a personal favorite of mine. If you're a Panasonic 3DO enthusiast, you'll be very happy to see 2 of these games on the library here, and they both work very, very, very well. And then moving on to a system that is absolutely notoriously hard to emulate, which is the Sega Saturn. I was very excited to see it here. Immediately, I jumped into Panzer Dragoon, and I'm very impressed with how this runs on the Cube X3. I mean, the experience was really good. Music, visuals, FMV, everything worked like it should. I then also checked out some Radiant Silvergun. What an absolute treat to play on this. I gotta tell you guys, there is some expensive and rare titles for the Saturn that you can play with the Cube X3. Unfortunately, not all my Saturn experiences were fantastic, as I did play the Saturn port of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and this one was chugging along at a very slow frame rate. I wouldn't really call it playable, so I mean, not every experience is fantastic with that console. And then last but not least, I had to check out the 32X running on the Cube X3. Another anomaly, failed system from Sega, came out right before the Saturn. That hideous mushroom add-on to your Sega Genesis and Sega CD. Playing Star Wars the arcade game, and this ran beautifully. So excited to see 32X on this device. So guys, that's my look at the Kinhank SuperCube X3, and this is a pretty solid little emulation device. It will allow you to play over 100,000 classic retro games in pretty good emulation. Of course, it's not one-to-one with the original console. This is an FPGA emulation, but as long as you aren't looking for that level of quality, this will get the job done and let you play pretty much anything you want. Of course, there were some hiccups with certain systems, going back to the PlayStation. That issue where the sound didn't play is really frustrating, so I definitely have to knock some marks off for that. I want this to be a plug-and-play solution. I'm sure there's a way to fix it within the settings, but if you're anything like me, you don't want to dick around, you just want your stuff to work, and that's kind of what this device is advertised for. Of course, it does offer gameplay at the higher-end systems, and we saw definite improvement over the Super Console X with running Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast games. The Dreamcast games ran really well, but of course the Nintendo 64 ran a lot better, but not quite perfect. Then of course we get into stuff like the PlayStation Portable, and some games ran fantastically, and then poor MotorStorm, I couldn't even get started. So as you get up to the higher end, you're still experiencing some issues, but they're somewhat playable. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the Kinhank SuperCube X3? Is this an emulation device you'd be interested in? Let me know in the comments. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. This is Michael B. the Game Genie, and I'll talk to you next time.